When thinking about gaming, it's likely that PlayStation comes to mind as it's one of the most successful brands within the gaming industry. Most PlayStation products have been massive hits, and that's still the case today, with the PS4 completely crushing its competition, consisting of Microsoft's Xbox One and Nintendo's Wii U. We have yet to see if the Nintendo Switch will outsell it though. With all this success, you have to wonder how this all came to be, and that's what I'm going to explain in this retrospective. I will uncover the history of PlayStation and explain how the brand has impacted not only the gaming world, but also the world in general. Before the PlayStation's existence, Nintendo and Sega were the biggest competitors on the gaming market. Sega developed an add-on for their console, Sega Genesis, which made the system capable of playing CD games. This add-on intimidated Nintendo as they feared it would lead more consumers towards Sega because of its improved technology. After all, CDs were cheaper to manufacture and held a lot more space than regular cartridges. Nintendo decided to give a CD-ROM extension to their own console, the Super Nintendo. But they weren't exactly experts in that field, so they asked Sony for help, which was the right brand for the job. Sony agreed to help Nintendo, even though they weren't interested in entering the gaming industry themselves. Except for one Sony exec named Ken Kutaragi, who at some point asked the president of Sony himself if they could develop their own gaming system. But Norio Oga strictly denied his request because games were considered toys and Sony was not a toy company. Partnering up with Nintendo was the only chance for Sony to become a part of the gaming world, so Ken obviously had to take this opportunity. In 1991, on the day after Sony had announced that they were working with Nintendo on the CD-ROM, Nintendo did something quite unexpected by revealing that they were working with Philips on the project instead. This betrayal made Sony understandably furious, not helped by the fact that Philips was Sony's rival company. Due to this event, Ken confronted the president at Sony yet again and recommended that Sony should create their own console, to which Norio Oga finally agreed, who was really upset over Nintendo's betrayal. Nintendo's reasoning for betraying Sony was because they didn't like where the deal was heading. Sony would own the rights to all the CDs being distributed for the console, which would gain Nintendo a considerably less amount of profit. Becoming a big console developer within the world of gaming would be a difficult challenge for Sony, as there were already two giants dominating the market, so in order for Sony's console to succeed, it had to be revolutionary. Most developers at the time were creating 2D games, and Ken felt it was necessary for gaming to finally evolve into the third dimension. Sony themselves weren't experienced with developing video games, so they asked many other known developers to make the games for their system. Initially, most of the companies they asked didn't want to risk making 3D games, as it would be both difficult and expensive. However, after Sega released the 3D fighting game Virtua Fighter, many developers returned to Sony wanting to experience with this new technology. Ironically enough, Sony was saved by Sega. Sony's first game console launched in Japan on December 3rd of 1994 and was titled the PlayStation. Before releasing it in America, Sony wanted to have a big marketing campaign, and the Electronic Entertainment Expo was a perfect place for that, more commonly known as E3. This event was first held in 1995 and was a gaming conference where game companies could present their upcoming products, which people could try out for themselves. Entering E3 was a brilliant marketing move by Sony, as it led to huge success for the PlayStation. Another reason why the console succeeded so greatly was because of its low price tag at only $299, which was $100 cheaper than Sega's newest console, the Sega Saturn, which became a huge flop. All this, including a price drop of a whopping $100, made PlayStation the first gaming console to surpass 100 million units. Before Sony entered the competition, games were labeled as toys catering toward children, which, like I mentioned earlier, was the reason Sony didn't want to be part of that industry. But instead of marketing them as toys, Sony presented gaming as a lifestyle that anyone could get into, with games for all ages. This is a perspective that has done gamers a huge favor over the years, as gaming culture is finally accepted in today's society, which wasn't the case before, as gamers used to be stereotyped as basement-dwelling nerds. Of course, there are still some naysayers out there, some accusing games of making people violent, but they're small compared to the worldwide community of gamers, both casual and dedicated players alike. With the incredible success of the original console, Sony obviously had to capitalize on that success. Sony's second console, simply titled the PlayStation 2, released on March 4th in the year 2000 and met with even greater success than its predecessor. The convenience of being a disc manufacturer really worked in Sony's favor for their next console. Of course, the PS1 was able to play CDs that were simply more powerful than regular cartridges and also cheaper to produce. The PS2, on the other hand, was able to play DVDs, meaning you were not only able to play games on the system, but movies as well. Sure, the original Xbox could do this as well, but that system released a year afterwards and required a certain remote to be able to play them. With the PS2, you could just pop in a movie disc and play it immediately. This made owning a PS2 a lot more beneficial than owning a regular DVD player. More beneficial than other consoles too, but that depended on what type of games you liked. Even so, the PS2 would most likely have the game you were looking for, as its library contained nearly 4,000 different games, which was the biggest game library for any console at the time. You were also able to play PS1 games on it, expanding its library and appeal even further. The PS2 hit many great achievements, the most noteworthy one being that it became the highest selling console of all time, selling close to 160 million, and it still holds that record to this day. The Nintendo DS came close to beating it, but still lacked a few millions to surpass the PS2 sales. Another achievement was its incredibly long lifespan. A console's lifespan normally lasts for about 7 years, but the PS2 managed to stay in production for 13 years, which is almost double the standard. While the PlayStation brand was dominating the home console market, Nintendo was still the king of handhelds, so Sony decided to enter the handheld scene themselves by releasing the PlayStation Portable on December 12, 2004. While the Nintendo DS sold almost twice the numbers, the PSP still managed to sell more than 80 million systems, which was quite impressive for Sony's first try at handheld gaming. Sony returned to home consoles on November 11, 2006 with the release of the PlayStation 3, and it unfortunately had a worse launch than expected. It was difficult to program for and also ridiculously expensive, costing $500 to $600 at launch. This turned many PlayStation gamers off, who went for the Wii or Xbox 360 instead. Fortunately for Sony though, they eventually found a way to lower production costs, meaning they could sell the console for a lot cheaper, which made the system way more accessible. It didn't hurt having systems selling exclusives either. In the end, the PS3 sold over 80 million units, almost identical to the Xbox 360 sales. Nintendo was the clear winner this time, as the Wii sold more than 100 million, mostly because it catered towards a more casual audience, appealing to people with little to no gaming experience. Sony had yet again a unique disc format its newest console could play, this time being Blu-ray discs, so owning a PS3 came with a lot more perks than owning a regular Blu-ray player, just like the situation with PS2s and DVD players. The PS3 also saw the release of the PlayStation Network, which gave you access to online features, such as playing games online and downloading games from the PlayStation Store. Sony re-entered the handheld scene by releasing the PlayStation Vita on December 17, 2011. However, Sony's handheld was again overshadowed by Nintendo's new handheld, the 3DS, which has currently sold more than 70 million and is still going strong, whereas the Vita only managed to sell 15 million in its extremely short lifespan. The Vita is Sony's least successful gaming system, and its relevance within the gaming community has faded into obscurity. While the previous years for the PlayStation brand had been a little hectic, their newest console would put the brand back on the right track again. The PlayStation 4 was released on November 15, 2013, and ended up having the most successful launch out of any console to date, managing to sell 1 million consoles within 24 hours. Nowadays, the PS4 is completely dominating the gaming market, absolutely obliterating the Wii U sale and outselling the Xbox One by a wide margin. The Nintendo Switch has only been around for a year, but it's off to a good start, so we'll have to see whether it'll match the PS4's success in the future. The PS4 has been out for only 4 years, yet it has already surpassed 75 million system sales, and it's likely to surpass 100 million by the end of its lifespan. As you can tell by now, Sony has been doing very well with the PlayStation brand, turning it into one of the main competitors in the gaming industry. The original PlayStation revolutionized three-dimensional gaming, and the PS2 became the best-selling console of all time. While the PSP, PS3 and PS Vita didn't meet with as much success as before, the PS4 seems to have made up for that, and it looks like PlayStation has a bright future ahead of itself. On a wider level, Sony is largely responsible for making gaming culture as socially accepted as it is today, so gamers have a lot to thank them for. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective. I haven't made one since my first video on this channel, which was about the platform genre, so I thought it was time to make another one. PlayStation, just like the platform genre, is something I hold dearly, so I wanted that to be the topic for this one. Anyways, I'm Arcadon, and hopefully you'll see me next time.